My grandmother used to do that, and I didn't spend much time with her, but how do you know what you're getting when you ferment it?
Well, when you ferment a drink, you know
they
from...
take the top off the sauerkraut crock, but like what, where...
What's good, what's bad.
Right.
Well, realize that in fermentation, one of the keys to many fermentations is that you separate it from the air layer. So that's when you do a big crock of sauerkraut, you push it down beneath the liquid. Everything beneath the liquid's fine. That mold, like cheese, you just cut the mold off and everything inside is fine. So the inner is fine. It's sort of the outer that you want to not consume necessarily.
Can you seal it with fat too, or not necessarily?
You can. You mean seal the top of it with fat? People do some of that. They float oil on top, but it's not as tricky as once you get into it in practice.
Rancid, though, you might spoil the taste.
It could. Depends on what it is that you're working with. But in terms of fermented drinks, it's really simple. It's really, you just make a sweet drink of anything you want, right? And then you could just leave it out. And these yeast that are, this much air has tons of different kinds of fungi floating around. We're in a sea of organisms. That's what I'm saying. It's an illusion that you're separate. Every breath you take, you're bringing in a whole forest of things into you. And it's just happening. So what would settle down onto that sweet drink is a certain kind of yeast called Saccharomyces, which means sweet-eating fungus. And then it'll start eating those sugars, right? Now I remember what makes me think of it a lot is Jamaica. Is going to see the Bushmen of Jamaica and getting up in the hills, and they're way into like how many, the number of things. So like they may like the number 12 or 14 or whatever. So they'll go out and get 14 different ingredients, and they'll do what I say, make this dense sweet, and they'll add honey to it, make it very sweet. And then these yeast land in it, and they start eating the sugar, and they make it into alcohol. So if you tasted it every day, it would become a little less sweet and a little more alcoholic. And you can drink it the whole time. And then comes a point that it gets drier and drier. The sugars disappear. It's mostly alcohol and water then. And then, if you didn't cover it, if you didn't seal it, the next thing that happens is another set of bacteria land that only eat alcohol. And they eat the alcohol and they convert it to what? Vinegar, acetic acid, right? Vinegar, bad wine. I mean, it's funny that we go buy vinegar. Isn't it hilarious that we go buy vinegar in the store? All you have to do is take some wine and leave it out, and you're going to have vinegar. And you can throw some herbs in and have, and now of course there's all different, there's a spectrum of flavor, and there's certain nuances that you learn that allow you to get a consistency of flavor or whatever. And these revolutions that happen, like Asheville, North Carolina, there's hundreds of people brewing there now. And so any party I go to, I taste many, and some I really like, and some taste like complex cheeses, that I'm just not so into, in my palate. But it's really a lot about, that's one of the things that Sandor teaches, it's a lot about palate. So, what is food, what is gross, is a lot about what we're used to, and a lot of things that people like, I think are kind of gross, and a lot of things that I like, other people may think are gross. So there's a lot of cultural conditioning around that. So what I want to do is encourage you to get back to simply making, if you're going to drink ferments, alcoholic ferments, drink things that are made with herbs. Now, why am I talking about this? Because this plant was one of the primo plants used in fermentation of beers and wine. What are the names we call it now? What are some names people know?
Is that gill of the ground?
Gill of the ground, ground ivy, creeping Charlie is another name for it. I told you the botanical name, glaucoma, and it's in the mint family. But the name from Europe, the old name of this being right here, is ale hook. Ale hook. Because it was so used in the beard. And it looks like the hook of a horse here. So that's how they remembered it, and that's probably why it was brought here, was to be used in the brewing of the time. And also another thing about this amazing being that is really exciting, and this is what you get when you drink your honey wine made out of this. And someone just served it down in Roanoke. They called it Gilly. They thought it was a nice little name. They called it Gilly wine. Is that it removes heavy metals from the body. And all of us could use that. all of our bodies contain mercury and other lead and other heavy metals in it. And to help facilitate that flow, there's a number of ferments like miso that help do that, and seaweeds help do that. But also this thing, you could have it just as a tea, you don't have to have it as a ferment. But that ferment, when you ferment something, it brings those compounds into an active state, an enzymatic living state. And when you drink it in, it's much more readily active in the body. So gill over the ground, alehoof is a plant that we need to recognize, and it's in our lawns. It's telling us, hey, don't forget about me. I'm important. So bring it back in, have it as teas. It makes a beautiful, yummy tea. And you can mix it with your lemon balms and other things and enjoy it. Any questions around?